Well, good afternoon. Good afternoon and welcome. It's my pleasure to welcome you to the 2024 State of Research Address for the CU Anschutz Medical Campus. Now, for those that have participated in this event before, there's something different this year. We're all here together. So we first did this in 2020. And of course, at that time, it was virtual. And the attendance was actually really pretty good. So we looked at it for a few years. We said, let's keep doing it virtual. But this year, we decided to do it in person. So there's a good number of people online. We're delighted to have so many people here. And there's probably extra refreshments in your way out if you want those. There's plenty to go around. So it's my pleasure to be here. Here's our game plan for today. Hopefully, this will not take up the whole time, and we'll have time for questions and some interaction afterwards. So I'll discuss some of the top challenges in biomedical research. You could put a lot on here. I picked out three to highlight and lay the landscape, if you will. We'll talk about our office a bit, the research office, what we're doing, some new initiatives and so forth in our office. Of course, we've got the metrics. We'll talk through our funding metrics for this last year and a variety of other research metrics. We'll do some campus research highlights. The challenging part there is that I can probably pick on anybody in this room and talk about what you've done to contribute to research. We'll have just a few that we highlight there. We'll talk about our partnerships and community engagement, and then a bit of looking forward. Now, for those online, I would say we do have a Q&A at the end of this, so feel free to drop some questions now as we're going. We'll look at those in the end. So again, as I talk in my peer group and attend meetings about research administration, there's several themes that come out. There's a lot. I picked out three. One is research funding. So biomedical research is highly dependent on federal funding. We specifically, and most academic medical centers and campuses are specifically very dependent on the NIH. So if we look at the NIH funding over the last 20 years, you can see in the gray bar, the actual amount of funding has gone up and down, but the last few years it's gone up pretty well. So in terms of absolute dollars, we've seen this increase from 27 billion up to 47 billion. It's a nice increase. Now the gold bar actually shows a price index, an inflation index put in there. And you can see that over the last 20 years, even though we've done better the last 8 or 10 years, we still aren't with parity with where we were 20 years ago. So as we think about our enterprise, this is, of course, an important part of that. Where is funding going to go in the future? The next thing I'll say in terms of a challenge is the regulatory burden on research. When I just started this job, I was meeting with a researcher and we were talking through an event or something. And they looked at me and said, this is a highly regulated area we're in. And I said, yeah, it's a highly regulated area. And I think the regulations on research, particularly federal research, has really increased over time. So this is a wonderful slide from Koger, and it talks about looking back 30 years and saying these are different regulations that have an impact. So for the most part, these require some training, some action from institutes. You can see that this went up at a decent click, but over the last 5 or 10 years, in the last 10 years, there's been a 181% increase in regulations. So one thing that we're focused on in our office is making sure that we are compliant as an institution, but also that you can do your work and we can all do our work as researchers. The last one, it's hard to find data for, but the idea is the pressures that are on academic medical centers and therefore academic medical campuses. So the margins for academic medical centers over the last few years, and this is the most recent data we could find, this is from 45 leading national medical centers, has certainly fallen. And this is in the light of revenue actually increasing a fair bit. So what we're seeing, and we certainly feel on the university side too, is that the costs of what we're doing have gone up, and despite increases in revenue, we have seen tighter and tighter margins, which will have an impact on research missions at academic medical campuses. So those three things we'll talk about: funding, the NIH funding, the regulatory, burden or requirements around research, and the revenue that's flowing to academic medical campuses in general. Okay. Oh, there's lots of slides there. So research metrics. Thank you very much. Okay, so here are the headlines for this. So we've got a lot of principal investigators. These are people that are holding active awards, over 1,800 people on campus. A good number of clinical trials, almost 4,000, and that's resulted in over 14,000 patients that are enrolled to research studies. We utilize a very large laboratory footprint, over 800,000 square feet. And in terms of research proposals and contracts, over 3,000, over 3,400 this year. So here are the numbers you've probably been waiting to look at. So this is the update on research funding for this year. So you can see in the gray area, that's our federal funding. That's our foundational funding. And that represents 55 to 58% over the last few years. This last year is 55%. So we've maintained the proportion of federal funding. Our overall external sponsored research funding has gone from 705 million to 756 million. So it's a pretty good year. That represents a 7% increase. And if you go back to 2019, that represents a 37% increase. And as I mentioned, that's with over 3,000 individual awards. Now, I think some of our friends from philanthropy are here, and with our many supporters in the community. In addition, there's $153 million in philanthropic gifts supporting research that comes into the university. So together, we have a lot of resources in play. So if we break down that 756 a bit more, you can see again, 55% is federal. I would note that that industry, that gray portion, is substantial and real. I think we've been working very hard to recognize that part of our portfolio, if you will, at 18%. Universities and hospitals, foundations are 10%. Universities and hospitals, a lot of subcontracts there. If you break down the federal funds at 420, you can see again, 85% of that is the NIH. So the NIH, based on the work we do, is our natural sponsor. Now we've been talking, I'll show some slides about this, of trying to get other sources of federal funds. We do get a decent amount from DOD, some DHHS are there as well. But again, 85% again this year, same range as it's been the last few years, has been NIH. So if we break a few of these funding sources down over the last 5 years, you can see DOD, 21 million this last year. DOD tends to be a little lumpier. It's maybe just a different pot, and the way they deliver the funds tends to be more of a bolus in effect. But you can see we've been around $20 million a year. That industry is in gray there. You see that has increased from, say, 84 million in 2020 up to 134. And I checked the data. It's 134 2 years in a row. That's correct. The gold is a really important NIH funding. And you can see there's actually been a little variation there. We actually dipped down just slightly last year. We're up from 322 to 360 this year. So that's a nice increase. So we talk about diversification. What can we do? So one opportunity, and we'll talk more about this, is an ARPA-H. So we have been contracted with now up to $68 million in federal funds to CU entries to our campus in terms of ARPA-H. The reason it says up to is these are monies that are sequestered for us, but all this is milestone driven. So we have to meet those milestones to receive the funding. We've had a lot of great teams that have done this. Mike Zusick and Karen Payne were the first ones on campus to receive this. I would note that they were AB Nexus awardees. So AB Nexus is Anschutz Boulder. They had some early ideas, wanted to work with Boulder. I think I would say that helped to position them to be ready when the ARPA-H opportunity dropped. And again, as we all know, those can come pretty quickly and have to respond pretty quickly. So we're well positioned for that. Congratulations to them. Matt Winnie and Eric Campbell have done some great work looking at the bioethics around one of these projects as well. And then most recently, Christine Wong and Kia Washington have been awarded an award through ARPA-H as a prime, a multi-institutional award as prime here, looking at curing blindness. So with that, we'll take just a moment to watch a brief video.
Currently, there really isn't any medical or surgical treatment for blindness. Some would say this is a moonshot. You know, we are shooting for the moon and hopefully we'll land among the stars. Well, this potentially means that we can help the over 3.5 million people in the United States suffering from total blindness. And the goal is to restore vision with whole eye transplantation. The surgery is pretty much like any other transplant surgery. The eye would be taken from a deceased donor. It would then be transplanted into someone that needs an eye to restore vision. It includes sewing together the blood vessels to restore blood flow, as well as the optic nerve, the nerve that restores vision. The optic nerve is part of the central nervous system, or the brain, and typically the brain doesn't recover from injury very well. So part of the challenge is to get this optic nerve to regrow or regenerate.
In any transplantation, in order for the transplant to be accepted, the patient's immune system needs to be modulated or suppressed. And so if you immunosuppress a patient, then they're going to be more susceptible to other complications. We're studying targeted ways of manipulating the immune system so that they can accept these types of organs without high levels of chronic immunosuppression. And some of the research that's being done may lead to breakthroughs that could benefit all transplant patients.
ARPA-H is a new federal funding agency, and really what it represents is a new opportunity to really go after that high-risk, high-reward research. It's an opportunity that we've never really had before. Diversifying our funding portfolio is one of our priorities. Making sure that our priorities are matching the directions of the federal funding agencies and that we're tapping into new sources such as ARPA-H. It really requires a focused effort. I really think that this is an exciting time. It's new opportunities for not just investigators on our campus, but our campus as a whole.
CU Anschutz is a place of innovation, a place that really supports innovation and new therapies. We are going to really be able to help a lot of people that are suffering throughout this country and the world.
Really an exciting project. Congratulations to all the people involved in that project, and we will follow with great anticipation. So let's transition just a little bit to talk about our research office and how we see ourselves as your partners in scientific discovery. So a number of years ago, we developed our mission and vision statements. I'll just take a moment on this. I'll say this as well. So I think there are probably some of the members of our group in the audience today. It is a great pleasure to be associated with the group in our office. Several hundred people who are dedicated, have great expertise, and focus on trying to advance science as your partners. And it's really an honor for me. So our mission is committed to a diverse team-based culture. We engage and collaborate with the research community to provide expertise, support, and guidance for the advancement of science. And our vision, together we make tomorrow's research happen. But also say I'm very fortunate to have a wonderful leadership team. Many of the folks you'll see here have been in leadership for many years, providing a great direction to our unit. I would note that Benishali and Laura are the two newest members of this team, both in clinical research operations and research development and strategy. So if we think of the ways that the OVCR, the research office, supports researchers, one thing we do, and we spend a lot of time thinking about this, is trying to help teams navigate the regulations, the compliance, proposals, contracts, awards, and funding, the environment that research exists in, right? Which is, again, as we said earlier, very regulated. So part of that is thinking about it from the beginning of the idea to work with the Office of Grants and Contracts to go through all the different things to study closeout. It's really that whole lifespan that we're trying to help people through. We do a variety of things in terms of education, training, open house orders, or hours rather, open house hours. We have a Zendesk. It's tens of thousands of different questions. We do a lot of things in our way to teach and to educate, support in that realm. One thing we touched on the last video is this idea of to understand new research opportunities. We identified ARPA-H, which is receiving billions of dollars, as a new opportunity with the different mechanisms. We work, I think, with some diligence in Laura's office to make you aware of that and to help support you in going in new directions with your research. Additionally, we've tried to help with recruitment. I think one of the issues is how do we engage with our community? One of the ways we engage is by clinical trials, which patients join us as study participants. Through our work with the CCTSI and the recruitment office, we work to increase the diversity of recruitment and making sure we have representative populations of patients that are involved. Now, one interesting thing, a number of years ago, I remember a number of teams came to us and said, we're really having difficulty in accruing to our trial. We're trying to get a certain population, we're trying to get a diverse population, we want to use social media. So social media has a lot of regulations around it, and so it was challenging. And so we as a team took this on, said, can we set up a way to do this in-house, which is economical? There are some outside entities that will do it, but it's very expensive, that fits all the needs. So we've now done 85 social media campaigns. You'll see one example here. We've gotten good feedback from the team, and this really plays into some of those from the previous slide. You just saw that the workshops we do in this realm as well. The feedback we've gotten from the teams has been really positive around these. So if we ask, did social media help you with your study recruitment? 70% said they reached a more diverse population. 80% said they recruited more participants. Remember, one of our early examples, we were sort of on the first few individually, and they said, we just turned off the commercial. I said, oh, what happened? They're full. It's all done. So the right kind of protocol works really well for social media. And I think that's one example we can diversify things. We'd also like to recognize the work from COMERB. I may have mentioned this last year. We're showing John Heldens here, the director of COMERB. So COMERB worked with the Institute of Healthcare, Quality, Safety, and Efficiency to look at reducing the time to open protocols and also reduce the paperwork burden. They partnered with several different groups on campus, including the Cancer Center and Barbara Davis. So we talked about this, but now it's been implemented. So the IRB officially shortened their application length by 70%. I got to sit in a few of those sessions. They went through and said, we could do this, we can consolidate this, we can eliminate this and still get the essence of what we need. I think that really personifies what people are doing in a lot of our different groups, looking at that impact on researchers. We do have a quality improvement dedicated effort with Leah Emmerich in our unit who works in this. Now, you know it's a successful project for a couple reasons. But one is, if you look on the screen, if when you finish the project, you have an honorary beverage named after that, which I can attest was consumable. All right, we have time for one more video. For this one, I would just say that one need that we recognized a number of years ago were with INDs, so investigational new drug applications. This is where an investigator with the FDA will hold a specific, serve as sponsor for a protocol. And we found that we had a decent number of these on campus, but we didn't have necessarily the structure we wanted around that. So we established the Investigational New Drug and Device Office to assist investigators. And we've now, since 2023, have helped dozen investigators, both with guidance and advice and counsel as they submit these to the FDA. We've also helped with compliance and sort of saying, you're up for your 1-year renewal and so forth. This has also been really important as we think about some of our work in which we are, as a campus, developing the drug through the Gates Biomanufacturing Facility and others, where the university will in some cases act as sponsor for that protocol here. So I'd like to recognize the IND office, Heike Newman, everybody else that's been working on this project.
CAR T therapy over the course of my career is probably the most exciting development that's happened in the space of oncology. The Gates Institute at the University of Colorado Anschutz Medical Campus is an institute that's been recently created through the transformative gift of the Gates family to advance cell and gene therapy on our campus.
We were lucky enough on campus to recruit and develop a biomanufacturing facility that really is a world expert facility in generating these genetically engineered cellular therapies. It really feels like we're on the precipice of changing the way that we treat cancer and other difficult to treat diseases. Once we've amassed an amount of what we call preclinical data, we then need to interact with the FDA to develop a clinical trial.
In order to do clinical research, which is basically any research that involves human subjects, there are lots of rules and regulations that have to be followed.
The Investigational New Drug and Device team is a group of people who work at the university who help us interface with the Food and Drug Administration.
The office was established within the Office of the Vice Chancellor for Research. The university acts as the sponsor for Gates Institute clinical trials, and we're the face of the university for the FDA.
When you're developing new drugs or new devices, they have to be regulated in a way that creates safety and transparency, and it's incredibly complicated and arduous task with the Food and Drug Administration. Medicine now is team medicine, right? Like, you need to have people that help all the way from getting the patient in the door, to taking care of the patient, to performing research, and to making sure that research is all compliant. And all of that requires a massive village.
Instead of having to relearn every single time with different researchers, with different clinical trials, we've created these standardized processes, including how to communicate, where to put information, who needs to be included, when things need to be done.
It feels very concierge in nature. Having somebody who's got expertise in this that helps you walk through the process is really a huge benefit that we have on our campus.
It gets these novel therapies into patients faster. It allows our scientists to stay in the lab and continue to develop new products. It allows clinical researchers like me to focus on developing the protocols.
You give the patients hope as their disease is progressing and as their options are narrowing or really becoming almost none. There's a deep sense of urgency, right? And time is of the utter essence for these families. The potential and the capacity to reprogram the immune system to help fight disease is like really almost a blank canvas, and it's just what kind of paint you want to put on it.
It was great to feature the great work being done there and the support given. Let's shift gears again and talk about some of the other units within our research office. It's my pleasure to highlight OLAR and the great work they're doing. Now, they have a footprint of 120,000 square feet. The important thing to recognize is that's space that they're monitoring 7 days a week, 365 days a year, 24 hours a day. I remember when I first started during our visiting, there's a snowstorm coming. I said, what are you gonna do? Jerry said, it's all covered. We do this. We cover this space and everything in it. So it's a wonderful group. We've identified a number of years ago some capacity needs for special procedures and for behavioral work. And so with the support of the Chancellor and the Executive Vice Chancellor, we've been able to expand that space and meet the needs of researchers. Very pleased with that. The staff of more than 100 support more than 300 investigators with 484 protocols. So a wonderful and very important part of our research support system. I'll make one note here of Mark Dowse. I think Mark is in the crowd. I won't point him out. Mark has been part of our team for a long time. He's going to retire next year after more than 30 years. Mark has helped to set up many of the committees that have been important to our the work we do, honestly, and including, I think a lot of us interact with Mark as the IACUC director. So I just want to recognize his great service to our institution, our research community, and thank him. Happy retirement. April 1st, right, Mark? CCTSI is just another really integral component in the work we do on campus as researchers. I wish to highlight some of the work they've done this last year in the CTRC Startup Dashboard. So the CTRC, the CCTSI, they surveyed the users and they found that there was some needs in this area. So in response to that feedback, they developed a new study dashboard and a user guide. I think it's a great example of responding to the needs of the research community. So one thing we focused on the last few years, hopefully you've noticed, is really thinking about our communications internally with all of you and our communications externally. We're delighted to have a new member of our team with Tula Wellbrook. She's the new research communications director for our office. You'll see her handiwork and you'll probably interact with her as well. We have a lot of different communications. I'd like to just highlight a few of these. One is our bi-monthly research bulletin email. I think this went out yesterday. Our hope in this is to give you just a little bit of information so you can click and learn more. We work to keep this consolidated. We're asking for just a few minutes of your time bi-monthly to keep up on a lot of these things. Also highlight our webpage. We have an extensive webpage. It seems like a webpage of this size is constantly being looked at and modified, and that's the nature of it. I think Tula is looking at this as an area to try to, the hundreds of pages we have here, to further consolidate those as able. We're delighted to have Tula on our team. So we are part, all of us, of a thriving research community. I must say, one of the most enjoyable parts for me of being in this role is the way I get to interact with so many different types of researchers. On one side, you've got bench researchers making basic scientific discovery and the needs to help that work continue. On the other hand of this translational spectrum are people that are working in public health, for example, or working on translating the findings that could have started in the bench all the way to a population of people. And we represent that and everything in between. Now, one of the challenges is the needs of those two researcher groups I just talked about are pretty different, and they're both very important. So that's one thing that we spend a lot of time focusing on, all elements of translation. I would also say we have a tremendously productive faculty. This slide started out by saying, let's put a couple of key publications in there. We kept throwing publications and said, well, that's not going to work. There's just too many of them. We are wonderfully productive faculty. And I'm going to go through a few highlights, a few awardees and a few grants, recognizing that I can't recognize all the people that deserve recognition. I would say this too, though. One observation is we see these great publications. We sometimes hear about these publications a couple of days after they come out. And we try to amplify that or get some additional national media. It's hard to do. Sometimes we find about them when they're embargoed. And I can tell you the communications team completely understands an embargoed paper. It can help you through that. In those situations, we can oftentimes, as you see here, help to amplify your message in different ways, which is really interesting. I think that helps us as a campus, you as a researcher. So if you've got an idea, I think we've even got a contact here. Certainly work with communications people in your own unit. But if you have any questions, if you got a very impactful finding, reach out to us. We can help you with that. Last year, 214 million reach to the print and broadcast 2024. So just remarkable amount. So again, a lot of different awards. We could highlight a few here. There's been a great collaboration between the Colorado School of Public Health and School of Medicine with a significant federal award supporting a new biostatistics research center to better understanding of diabetes. The RNA Bioscience Initiative with Dr. Sujatha Janganathan has done some great work bringing science and STEM to the local high school level. Her work has garnered a lot of attention, very well deserved, and really proud of what she's been able to do in that area. Would also like to mention Jed Lamp and his work, multiple grants looking at antibiotic effectiveness and drug toxicity in the School of Pharmacy. Next, let's talk about some new leaders on campus. I can say that the research community is very well served by Dean Riley. As issues came up and I reached out to John Riley, he was always there to help with research. We have felt the same welcoming and embrace, if you will, from Dean Sampson. Dean Sampson has an extensive research background. He understands the issues around research very well. We're talking about many ways in which we could partner. And I could say on behalf of our office, we're looking for ways to help to enact the strategic vision he has around research for the School of Medicine. We express our warm welcome to him. There are a number of other research leaders on campus that have gone through transition. Blake Hill, I might have seen Blake walk in today. He's named the new chair, Department of Pharmaceutical Sciences in the School of Pharmacy. Donna DeBelia is named the new Associate Dean for Research in the Colorado School for Public Health. Deborah Parra Medina is named the inaugural Executive Director for the Center of Health Equity at CU Anschutz. And Jayashri Kalpathy Kramer is named the Director of Health Informatics for the CCTSI. So welcome to all these leaders and others. So again, there's been a lot of our faculty have been honored over the last year. We're going to talk about just a few of those. It just was special pride that we could announce the awarding of the U.S. National Science Foundation Waterman Award for 2014 to Katrina Claw. So Dr. Claw is one of 3 investigators across the nation that was recognized in this matter. Her work in pharmacogenetics was recognized at the national level, and this is truly an honor. We're delighted and very proud of everything that she's been doing. In addition, I would note that there are a number of other honorees within our midst. I'll mention that Tracy Bale was named to the National Academy of Medicine. Dr. Bale is one of 100 nominees in the country this last year. Dean Ralph Altieri was recognized for really his global work in pharmaceutical sciences by the International Pharmaceutical Federation with his Exceptional Leadership Award. And also David Bentley was elected as a fellow at the Royal Society of Medicine for his work in messenger RNA and RNA polymerase. So congratulations to all of them and everybody else. We note that we are a Hispanic serving institution along with the downtown campus. This is a very meaningful and important designation. So the HSI Advisory Committee has been working across campus to advance equity and diversity through this grant and other activities. I would note that there was a Latin Excellence Symposium held in September of 2024 with great attendance. And as we've got a few questions about investigators that say, I have a grant that's associated with our HSI status. What I would say is please reach out to us if you're interested in such awards so we can help you through that and adjudicate that indeed you do have eligibility. One of the things I've learned from talking to people in this area is we are a Hispanic serving institution. And one of the key words in that is serving. And I think the people involved in this are really working to make sure we live up to that designation. Another really exciting area for us has been the Anschutz Accelerator Initiative. So 8 projects were named recently, and this is through the generosity of the Anschutz Foundation. I think there's a lot of excitement around these projects. These were selected in that they may have an impact clinically in the next 3 to 5 years. So many of these were later stage ideas. And I suspect in future presentations on this in this setting, at the State of Research, we'll talk about some of the great work that's being done, started here. We'd also like to recognize that across our different schools and colleges on this campus, there's been a lot of recognition nationally in many ways. I think the research work that all of you are doing has helped with those recognitions, which you can see here, which are really very impressive. In many cases, the schools have moved and increased their ranking over the last several years. We see the School of Medicine as a top-tier institution. The School of Pharmacy is number 15 in the nation and top 10% overall. The College of Nursing, number 19 in the nation. And the College School of Public Health, 16, which is up 19 slots in the last 15 years. We also know the dental school is top 20 in terms of their NIH research funding among dental schools. It's an Apple Distinguished School. And the graduate school has done great work, particularly in faculty members and certifications related to research mentorship. One thing I would also note, though, that if we look at our standing at the campus level, and it's tricky to do that, honestly, a lot of this data is at the school level, but if we try to put it together, say, how are we doing year over year? We clearly have increases in funding. You've seen that. We've done pretty well there. But the rankings, in some ways, again, at the campus level, haven't necessarily gone up. And why is that? Well, there's a lot of other institutions in the country that are growing like that as well. So I think we need to continue to emphasize the work we're doing here, garner attention for that, and do the good work we're doing and diversify our portfolio. So CU Innovations is just a wonderful entity on campus for the research community. You can see here many of the accolades they've received over the last number of years. We've highlighted Mike Hollers as a great example of this. So Mike is a distinguished researcher. He's worked as an academic leader, I think Mike has started 2 or 3 startup companies, has multiple patents, and one of his most recent endeavors has been looking at the complement system, inflammation, and autoimmune disease, and how his discoveries could be translated to a project. Mike is within CU Innovations, helping investigators, and I would just urge anybody that's in this realm and hasn't interacted with CU Innovations to reach out, file that first invention discovery, and see where things go. In our next section, we're going to talk a bit about the power of partnerships. One thing we understand in research is that the power of what we do is amplified by partnerships. 2 of our great partners on campus, the Children's Hospital and UC Health. So for Children's Hospital, it's been a pretty exciting year. We've initiated the Colorado Child Health Research Institute. This is really done in partnership between CU and Children's Hospital, and represents the official administrative, scientific, and operational home for child health research. So when we looked at the needs of child health researchers, it was felt that this joint effort is really the key way to do this. We can also see that the annual child health research funding for CU and Children's topped $82 million last year. We've also had great research support from UC Health. Now, something we talked about last year, I believe, was the recruit program. So this uses EMR-embedded recruitment tools. So for those of us that have worked in recruitment, the electronic health record is actually a great way to interact with patients. You can screen patients, you can look at their demographics, you can consent and all sorts of things, send messages there. So this was something that's been worked on by UC Health. It's now been implemented, and I know a number of teams are successfully using this tool. Would also say we've been doing some work with pragmatic EMR embedded trials as well, in conjunction with UC Health, along these same lines. Would also mention Cosmos. So this is a new database. This is a pretty large database as I looked at it. So 262 million patients at 1,500 hospitals. For those that are looking at population-based EMR research, this would be a new tool, which I don't think is quite launched, but it's on the cusp, so soon to be launched. I would note in both cases, I want to do this, we've got wonderful partnership with Ron Sokol and Janae Neiman at Children's Hospital, as well as Tom Campbell and Lori Bloomberg-Romero at UC Health. So we appreciate their partnership. One thing that we initiated for the research community in the pandemic, and it was honestly a way to say thank you for all the people that made contributions both scientifically and supportively during COVID, was do a campus research awards. And so this has morphed over time to go from a COVID-oriented to just general recognition. This includes trainees, faculty, and staff. So I don't know if anybody from the review committee is here. Don't raise your hand. It's sort of anonymous, but there were over 200 nominations this year. I think I promised last year at 175, it probably would never go higher. So the good news is there's lots of people to look at. To the review committees, I thank you in advance for all you're doing there, because it's a difficult job trying to pick people. Would also mention that one of our new categories last year was the Chancellor's Distinguished Research Lectureship. So you can see the bottom right, there's a picture of Donna DeBelia making a presentation, I think right here. Oftentimes people from outside our institution come and speak to us. I think I've benefited from those and heard some great lectures over the years. We wanted to look at the researchers within our community who are doing great work and have them present to us so we can appreciate the scientific contributions they have made. Donna DeBelia did the first talk. David Schwartz was also named. He's going to give his talk in a few months, and then we'll decide who's going to do it next year. So I'd encourage you to attend those conferences. The first one was outstanding, and it's a great opportunity. Finally, I would mention in terms of community engagement, the biannual Transforming Healthcare Lecture Series, which most recently featured immunotherapy and AI, is also another wonderful way we're doing community outreach. So I think we're nearing the end of this, and we could do some Q&A here shortly, but we try to touch on a number of things today. First are the challenges we see in biomedical research. I touched on a few. I think there's a lot more. The office of our research office and what we're doing. We have some new capacities. We're trying to respond to what we see as the needs of the community. We looked over our research metrics. We're doing really quite well. We had a very good year. We need to continue to focus on what our internal assets are and those external opportunities. I was able to highlight the great work done by a few people. The only regret is that we couldn't focus on more of those. There are so many wonderful activities that are going out there. We look to the future as well. I think that those challenges are going to remain. We get a fair number of questions about the federal landscape right now. And I think a lot of us don't know what's going to change. Some things will probably change. What I can tell you is we're going to work very closely with our federal delegation or federal representatives in Washington to track the situation and update you as necessary. I would say in January, we have our federal research legislative update. I think it's February 14th, I believe. So if you're more interested in those things, please feel free to attend that. With that, I'll invite the leadership team up here and we can do some questions and answers. There may be some online, so why don't you guys come on up? Do we have any questions online yet? Okay. It's easier to ask questions online, so if there's any questions here, it's a bigger crowd, but it seems like a friendly crowd, so you could certainly ask your question if you'd like.
There's one question online that I can kick us off with. And panelists, you'll have to step up to the microphone here so that the online folks can hear you. The question is, outside of ARPA-H, what are other ways to diversify federal funding opportunities? With the expectation of NIH undergoing a large funding cut over the next 4 years, what is our campus doing to help researchers navigate other funding, especially in the basic sciences?
Or would you like to take that one? You can step up here, Laura, if you want to be.
Question is how we're helping to researchers to navigate other funding opportunities and diversify our portfolio besides ARPA-H, specifically in the basic sciences.
So if we're looking at ways to diversify our funding portfolio outside of the NIH, I think a couple things. One, I don't think we want to rule out NIH. We just need to be more creative about and strategic about how we go about our funding at the NIH. Two, ARPA-H is one of those other opportunities, but so is DOD. We expect that there's going to be, there's always a lot of money in the DOD that we aren't really tapping into. And Vic Babarda and his team at Combat really have done a great job of initiating those, and they've been very successful. So my office is partnering with Vic and his team as well. There's also other funding sources that we need to be looking at. Scott Arthur and I have talked about foundations, looking at foundation fundings and how we can team up in those different areas, industry funding. There's a lot of different opportunities out there, and I think we all are thinking about, with the changing administration, of how we can be more creative and strategic. And that goes back to our larger strategic plan that we're working on with the School of Medicine. Does that answer?
Great answer. Any other questions from the group? It's a big group, but like I said, I think it'll be friendly to any questions you might have. One more online, okay. It's easier to ask questions online, you see.
Another online question is, how do you anticipate sustainability to be introduced to the research labs on campus in the future?
So how do you think about sustainability to the research campuses? So I'm going to take that as sustainability maybe from an energy perspective, is how I would interpret that. Rory, do you want to chime in on that? I would say, I think this is, yeah, you and I can put it together. Which just is, I think there's been certainly more of a focus of looking at the energy usage in the laboratory. That's come up, I think, more regularly. There's a Green Labs initiative now, which we're working with, including that. Rory knows more about this than I do.
Yeah, I only know a little because I started to work. This is not the Vice Chancellor for Research's office. This falls under Terry Carruthers' area and facilities. They have hired individuals into their Green Labs and Green Initiative and Sustainability Office, and they're starting to work, I know definitely with my group, to look at different ways we can reduce energy and water and steam use. And I know that this office literally just got it started in the last 6 months. So I would very much imagine that we're going to start seeing more and more information coming out. I know they're doing an energy audit on campus to look at buildings and different ways of sustainability. Beyond that, I am not the expert. And so facilities group are the group that are leading that charge. And since they are in charge of all of the buildings on campus, they are the correct area for that to sit.
It's a quiet group today. From our panel, does anybody else would like to add comments to what I've said today? Going once. Well, I'll say this, that I think this was, the turnout was reasonably good despite the weather. So I plan to have this as a hybrid event. It's a question, my goodness. Golly, I know him. Thanks for the question, Golly.
How do you see artificial intelligence and tools like Copilot accelerating our ability to capitalize on new avenues in research?
So the question is on artificial intelligence. I think you mentioned Copilot specifically. I don't know if anybody else wants to take that. I mean, I would say, oh, Mike Miller's right there. That's good. So I think, again, I think there's a great opportunity in AI as we think about research. You mentioned Copilot. I think there's a lot of different ways. We're actually working on putting together a campus conference. I think it's going to be in February. We're going to look at activities that are being done currently on campus in the research realm, in the educational realm, and the administrative realm. AI is tricky for me in that it could be so broad and so wide. I think what we need to do is figure out ways that we can support researchers. Because there's two groups I think about. There's those that are into this, that are programming, that this is their main focus. There's a lot of other researchers, this isn't their main focus, but it could augment the research they're doing. We've been having more discussions about how to assist those and maybe bridge between those two different groups, right? Those experts in this area, they could give a lot of help to the researchers that are focused on something else, but the AI could augment that. To me, that's one of the challenges of how to set that up in a sustainable way in an environment around that. Anybody want to add to that? Thanks for the question, Dolly.
Tom, this is David Schwartz. Thanks for that great summary and thanks for your leadership. One of the things that you didn't address that I'm sure you're thinking about is the future of our research enterprise. So, project forward 5-10 years. What do the labs of the future look like? And what do we need to do to prepare our research enterprise for the labs of the future, both in terms of infrastructure as well as in terms of potential opportunities scientifically?
Thanks for the softball, David. I appreciate that. It's a big question. And I'll do my best to answer it. I think if you'd asked that question 10 years ago, I've got two mics. Okay. If you asked that question 10 years ago, I guess I have two mics. That's right. I never would have said we're going to be doing in person. We would be so remote as we are now, right? That's been a huge change that has impacted research. There's a peer group of people that do this kind of work, right? We talked about this a fair bit. I don't think there's been a lot of firm conclusions. If you look at animal-related research, there's certainly going to be more of an imprint around the need for bioinformatics. There's clarity around that, the security around that, the storage around that, and so forth. We clearly going to be doing bench research, I would say, a number of years from now. What's the mix of that and the bioinformatics or the electrical part of that? What's the workforce going to look like in terms of in-person or non-in-person, for example? So I think there's a lot of questions around that. There's been some trends, particularly in workforce, particularly I think in research informatics is certainly developing. But I would say the fundamentals are going to remain there in terms of bench research, animal research, clinical research. I would say in clinical research, the pandemic actually did a number of things to modify that, right? In terms of recruitment. We mentioned just in passing EMR embedded trials within the electronic medical record. I think in addition to that area, we could really transform the way we do clinical trials in that work. I wonder if anybody else in the group would like to comment on this one as well. So Allison's going to have, she'll go say something. I have to turn it on, sorry.
I think what you saw with the development of the I&D office is that we've traditionally been very decentralized and every research team does their thing and they make a lot of good things happen. I think what you're starting to see in the research environment is that we have to have building blocks that everybody then can move off in different directions and do the innovative work that they need, but they shouldn't be starting from scratch every time. The more depth we can give those building blocks, I think the more effective and more rapid in responding to the changing research environment we can be. And I think there's a lot of conversations happening between the School of Medicine and the VC for Research on how we do that, because I know around here centralization is not necessarily always viewed as positively as I think it could be. And I think what you saw, I say, with the IND office is they've been very efficient, effective, compliant, but also really helping researchers move quickly to do what they need to do. And I think we need to find those other hubs that we can continue to build on to make us more robust, give us some infrastructure that makes sense. I always say innovation and centralization, there's an inherent tension there. So it's finding that right balance between the two to enable things to move forward. So I think I think what NIH is also looking for is seeing more of that come together. So I think there's a lot of movement in that direction.
Allison, if you could stay up at the mic, we have one more question online too. Sorry.
David, did you want to do any follow-up on that?
Well, the only follow-up, I didn't really mean to ask you a tough question. It's a question that I think about all the time, and I think many of us think about because we're so invested in the research enterprise and thinking about what the future is going to look like. I don't necessarily think that we do enough planning for the future. Some of that planning, you can't predict the future, so some of that planning is useless planning. But oftentimes the options and opportunities end up falling in place with some of the plans that you put in place. And so I think it would be worthwhile thinking about a venture that focuses on what do the labs of the future look like? What are the needs of the research enterprise as we project forward for the next generation of investigators here at the University of Colorado? How can we position ourselves in the strongest way possible to lead those efforts 10, 15, 20 years from now?
Completely concur with those things. It's a difficult task, but certainly a very worthy task. But say in terms of strategic planning within our research office, we've been working on this for the last year and thinking about some of these issues. It's just not clear how some of these are going to go, but I completely agree with your comments. Any other questions or comments? Is there one? Megan, do you have something?
Yes, another one for Allison. It says, how is the Office of Regulatory Compliance meeting additional non-funded regulations?
There you go. You got a softball too.
As Dr. Flaig mentioned, there's a lot of new regulations coming in. There's a lot in the pipeline. It is not clear where that's all going to go with changes that are coming at the federal level. But I think we're trying very hard to figure out how, whenever there's new regulations, how can we feed them into the current process so that it's not an addition, it's just part of existing process. There are training requirements coming that are going to, training is training, and so trying to figure out exactly how to meet those requirements without being overburdensome. A lot of conversations with OIT around data security. And so data security changes are coming, particularly depending on the type of data that you're wanting to work with. So again, trying to build those centralized resources that you can plug into so that you're not having to create from scratch, I think is where we're looking to go. But that landscape is continually changing. And we try our best not to overburden.
Tom, thanks very much. So core facilities play a key role in supporting research on the campus. To date, I would say that often it's relatively decentralized in terms of core operations and each kind of supporting themselves and figuring things out themselves. Do you have any thoughts on the possibility of modifying that structure with a more intentional support for cores across campus and across schools?
Yeah, that's a great question, Eric. Thanks for the question. Cores are essential to the research mission, right? I think of the work we're doing. We're also a pretty decentralized place. I think Allison, a slide I think I showed a couple of years ago was a graph over 25 years of the faculty number, which went from like 1,500 to 5,500. So a lot of the things that we've done in a decentralized manner, kind of manner worked. It doesn't anymore. I think this is an area that's ripe for discussion and kind of consideration. I would just reemphasize like the point you're making, having robust cores that fits the needs of the research community will amplify what we're doing if that's working ideally. Yeah, I appreciate the comment. You got some questions. That's good. Any other questions? Megan might have one more there online. To wait long enough,
Just
people ask
one more
questions.
online. It says, given the change in administration, what are some of the ways that your office may be able to help us to support underrepresented trainees and researchers? And similarly, are there ways to support researchers who are working with diverse and underrepresented populations?
So I think the question is, with the change in the administration, how can we support diversity of researchers and maybe diversity in our overall committee? I think we have to be focused on these matters, right? What I would say about seeking diversity is it has to be intentional, it has to be funded, and it has to be persistent. So the efforts we have underway currently, we certainly need to persist. And I think that's true both faculty and staff, our students, but as well as I think I gave some examples about clinical research. We have to make sure that the research we're doing is relevant to the broader community. It's representative and the people that are participating in that, so we can use the data. Any other comments from the group? Thank you for that question. Allison?
Okay, I think the language. The language may have changed, but I think the principles that we have been working towards remain the same. We just have to think about it a little bit more creatively. Ben Escalier's shop is doing a lot with thinking about connecting into the community, as is the CCTSI. So there's a lot of work happening on campus around how do we continue to work with the community. And we just have to continue to do it, because I think from a science perspective, it's important that we make sure that the science has meaning to the broadest population that we can.
Well said. Okay, it's about 5 minutes till the hour. We have time for one more burning question. There might be one here. I see Tula walking over somewhere. That's great.
Hi, I was just wondering a little bit about the kind of process and discussions that are happening around the use of AI for research. So not as like the research product or things like that, but in things like compiling data algorithms and things of that nature, and how we're discussing, starting to integrate AI into our research processes and use that as a tool.
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm happy to make some comments. Anybody else here want to comment on that? Ron?
That's a wonderful question. And many of us have been discussing that through our data science and informatics core in the CCTSI, which Jayashri Kalpathy is the person who's directing it. We're having these discussions right now to see if the CCTSI should try to provide tools and education around that. Clearly, our clinical science graduate program, the master's, the PhD are going to have a big focus on this in coming years. But I think you raised a really important question that those of us that aren't informaticists want to know what tools are available, how we can use them, how they can actually assist in our research. And we need the experts to help advise us. The field changes like every week. So none of us can keep up with it. I don't even think the informaticists can keep up with it. So we're going to try to work on something that's a little more uniform and not do this just in the CCTSI, but work in the OVCR office and school of medicine, et cetera.
Well said, Ron. Okay, so anybody else in the panel would like to make any comments? I want to make sure I thank a few people today. Megan, Michelle, and Tula in particular. Everybody else, our AV team has been fantastic. I hope you enjoyed the in-person. We'll plan to do this next year. Thanks for all you do to support the research mission on campus. Thank you.